Hello, 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 and welcome to the Imaginary Movie Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm joined today by my... I've fucked that up, haven't I? Because I haven't done my quote, which I don't have with me. So let's just start that again. It's a live stream. It's live television. Let's just start that
Anybody
again.
watching? I don't think so.
No, try again. Hello, 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 and welcome to the Imaginary Movie Podcast. My name's Sam. I happen to like the way you smell, Joe. Earthy, peaty, with a touch of lilac.
And I'm Joe, and I think I'm going to like history.
Yes, you will when you're trying to have sex with your grandmother, you weirdo. Today we're doing our most indulgent and favourite type of episode, which is random Star Trek. We have picked at totally random and not at all preordained in any way whatsoever a random episode of Star Trek, and we're going to talk about it. We're not joined today by our estimable colleague David, who is off somewhere doing something. We're not really sure. He was on the bridge with us. Everything was fine, and all of a sudden he's gone. And perhaps, listener, we'll find out more as this episode progresses.
He was just beamed out of here, and we decided not to try and find out where he went. We didn't care.
No. There'll be an episode later in the season where we figure out, or again, maybe later on tonight. Joe, you're going to tell us what episode we're doing?
So we are doing the episode called Trials and Tribble-ations, which is an incredibly full, fun episode. And I think when we were watching it, or you were watching it yesterday, you said this is probably one of the best episodes of TV ever.
Not just Star Trek. Like, I think this is... I think it's got humour. It's got decent stakes. The technical scope of this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Why don't you tell us why this is so impressive and what this
firstly,
is?
The original air date for the show was, or this episode was November the 4th, 1996, which is a long time ago. So
I was 7.
I'd have been
I was
8.
7. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
you would
8.
have been 38. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So this episode basically is in honor of the original series of Star Trek, a tribute to. So it was the 30th anniversary of the original series of Star Trek. So they decided to do kind of like a tribute to it. So basically in this episode, the crew of Deep Space Nine on the Defiant traveling back from Cardassia, where they've been handed a Bajoran orb. And the Orb of Time, as it turns out, which has been returned by the Cardassian government for question mark reasons, because generally speaking, the Cardassians and the Bajorans...
It's the MacGuffin box. It's the MacGuffin box.
And basically, while on Cardassia, they picked up a hitchhiker who'd been trapped on Cardassia by the Klingon invasion. So they agreed to basically take him back into their territory. But, and here's where it starts to go wrong, it turns out that this person that they picked up, this human, isn't actually a human, he's actually a Klingon.
So I'm going to stop you there because that's a good setup for the episode. Now, number one, what do we love? What do we love about Star Trek? We love the science, we love the interaction with the characters, but 99% of my love for Star Trek comes from time travel episodes. Yeah. Time travel, it's why we're here. It's why I love Star Trek, because they have these crazy things where they go back in time. The prime example being the one with the whales, Voyage Home.
Yeah, Voyage Home, the movie, and we've already done an episode of the original series. The first podcast I was actually on, which was City at the Edge of Forever, I believe, which is where the original series crew go through some random time donut, and the time donut.
Yeah, previous episode, go back and look for that. There's just something about Star Trek and time travel which is just infinitely fun, and like they always have a good time with it. Whether it's Spock wearing his hat so his ears aren't showing off, or Shatner chopping wood in the whatever film that is. Like there's just so much fun that they draw from this.
It really is so enjoyable, and I think it's partly as well because not necessarily this episode, but it makes them more relatable because they're doing tasks that we've seen people do. They're put into a situation where they're uncomfortable, but we're used to. So you're seeing Captain Kirk chop wood, Um, you're seeing them try and come up with a reason as to why, like, Spock has pointy ears.
Yeah. Or the one in that original series episode where Kirk comes home with like food and groceries, and Mr. Spock isn't appreciative, and he's rather upset that Mr. Spock hasn't isn't more impressed or concerned that he's spent all day toiling away to get this stuff. It's just great fun.
It is.
This, to me, though, this is peak Star Trek. Like, I honestly don't think there is a better episode in all of every single series.
Absolutely isn't. And it comes out of absolutely nowhere. And I was saying this to you, like this point in DS9, which is what we're on, it's season 5, episode 9, I think. And at this point, they're kind of in a conflict with the Dominion, and the Klingons are being Klingons, and they're in this point where they're really, really struggling. People are dying. They're at war, and then just Kira's pregnant.
I'm on season 2. O'Brien. I'm on season with O'Brien's.
It's O'Brien's baby, but it's not Kira's. It's O'Brien and his wife had a child.
Oh,
and then
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, so his wife is on a transport with Kira and the doctor, and there's an accident. And to save the child, Bashir has to move it into Kira. And it's because Kira was actually pregnant at the time. So they had to come up with a way of making her pregnant. And the father of Nana Visitor, actual child, is Julian Bashir, the guy who plays Bashir. So
okay, carry the noodle on with you.
Yeah.
It's because for me, I'm on season 2. I'm like, and then she's not in this that much, but I was like, whoa, when did she get pregnant? I completely forgot about that. Continue. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've forgotten what we were discussing. Anyway, the reason that this the reason that this episode is so fun is because basically it is a tribute to the original series episode called the Trouble with Tribbles, which is probably one of the best episodes of the original series. To be honest,
you're our late coming, but certainly I think influential now expert on the original series, which you've watched. Like, where does the Tribble episode sit then? In terms, you said it's one of the best ones. Is there other ones that come close, or do you think this is the kind of standout?
I think the City on the Edge of Forever, which I've mentioned, is probably up there as well. And again, it's just because it's stupid and time travel and ridiculous. But after that one, you've got the Harry Mudd episodes, which are always fun. Harry Mudd's always a good character. But then this is probably up there with those ones, because again, you've got an almost Mudd-like character in Sirio Jones, who isn't really in this episode, The Trials and Tribble-ations. You see him, but he doesn't have much of a role.
I thought that was Harry Mudd. I was like, is that Harry? Is that the Harry Mudd guy? Because he's got these drinks, doesn't he? He spends the whole time like this, trying to stay out of people's ways during the fight.
He plays more of a role in the Trouble with Tribbles original series episode. He kind of plays a more influential role in that one, whereas this one, it's kind of moved the story on. So while you've got the footage of the Trouble with Tribbles episode, you're putting the cast from DS9 in this situation. And it basically gets there because the human that they have bought from Cardassia turns out not to be a human. He's actually a Klingon, and he made a massive mistake back in this period when he was younger and was kicked out of the Secret Service of the Klingons and forced to go become a merchant, and his life had basically gone downhill. And so he decided to go back in time and try and basically reverse what happened. So basically the crew of DS9 have to go back, follow him, try and trace him, and stop him changing the course of history.
It is the most stupid premise. Like when you actually think about it, it's like, so they go back in time, and like there's always some time fissure. There's always something that happens. Like they're never in control unless they try and reach what 9.9 or whatever it is they do. But we're back in time. We're conveniently back in time at this point. Like there's always just
what happened. There was a surge in the plasma field that caused us to pass back into
the Tomatron radiation, which has actually affected the isotronic resistors, and thus we're now travel back in time. I can Star Trek bullshit all over the place, Joe. Don't you worry about that.
So basically, it's
hold on, because you mentioned the 30 years stuff. This was coming out in 30 years anniversary for Star Trek. There's also an episode of Voyager, which I think came out the same year later on, perhaps, which also kind of paid homage. I think it had Sulu in it. So it's kind of like this is a real love letter, isn't it, to the original series? And so we get lots of great sets. Number one, which I love. I love the sets in this, and there's some great stories about how they were trying. They spent ages trying to find the chair from the bar on the Enterprise or the space station, whatever it is. And they managed to find one. Like, they were looking for months about trying to find this one chair because it's they get thrown around lots, and they needed one to be able to make a copy. We get lots of composite footage of DS9 characters in the show, and I love how they become progressively braver as the episode starts. Like, it starts off, they just kind of maybe have a guy floating in the background who walks, and then the last scene in the episode is the commander, who I've completely gone blank his name, Cisco, fucking talking to Kirk, like, which I think is taken from a different episode where someone speaks to Kirk.
Yeah. Oh, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back.
So I think that is a different episode.
It is, yeah. But just saying, it's great. It's great how brave they are to just like go for it as the episode progresses. You know. So what kind of comes next?
I was just going to say, this is the kind of the point where you first really get that kind of homage, because the point where they realise that they've gone back in time is like in front of the view screen. The Enterprise just appears in front of them, and anybody that's seen the original series, you see that Enterprise, and you're like, holy shit!
Can you imagine watching this in 1996?
I know.
Actually imagine that, like sitting down with your shitty television, tiny TV.
And there wouldn't have been any kind of spoilers back then. No spoilers. You wouldn't have seen anything about it, probably.
You wouldn't even have an episode title. You'd have nothing.
You'd just be sat there like, no. And of course,
go on.
I was just going to say that then, like, the next scene is when they realise where they are. It's them going, well, we need to go over to the Enterprise because that's where he is, but we need to like be in the right uniform. So they get back into the old uniform of the original series, and the way that they shoot it and stuff as well. You can just see the kind of going like, oh my god, look at this! Isn't this great? And it's a love letter to Star Trek, the original series, and they extend that love, I think, through every single facet of this episode. As you say, the costume design is spot on. It's absolutely beautiful. Like, the hairstyles, they get
everything right. The hairstyles, as I mentioned, the sets already. But even the way it was shot, I think they really had to use different cameras, and they had to really change what they usually did to get that.
This is where my quote from the introduction comes in as well, because they're talking about the uniforms, and Dax comes around and she's like, these are, and they're shorter, and she's like wearing like a mini skirt that her used to wear, and that's when Bashir kind of looks at her and goes, I think I'm going to like history.
Yes. Because he's a sexual predator.
He really is.
He's so creepy.
I think like O'Brien and Bashir are like the MVPs in this episode. O'Brien in particular is absolutely golden. But from this point, they basically then, basically in the original series episode, what's happened is the Enterprise has been called with an emergency broadcast to go to a space station, and it turns out that there's somebody on this space station has some grain that's super important. It's in an area that's kind of questionable between the Klingon Empire and the Federation, and it's in Federation control, and they have the better claim to it, apparently, according to Spock. But they're called there.
This is what original series Star Trek was about. Grain.
Yeah, grain. So they're there. This guy literally used an emergency situation just to get Kirk there to protect grain. So they need to try and track down this human that turns out to actually be a Klingon that they're tracing. And they need to put some people on the space station to see if he's there, and some people on the Enterprise to see if he's there. So they basically split up, and Odo and Worf, in some rather great costumes, go down on the space station, and Bashir and O'Brien are together, and they're on the Enterprise along with Cisco and Dax, who are together. They're also on the Enterprise.
Can we take a moment to talk about Worf? Because I think he gets the best lines in this show. So we've already mentioned the one about the way he smells, which is beautiful. But there's obviously there's a burning thing of that. Worf gets the hat, he gets the Spock covering to make sure that no one sees his cranial ridges. Mm-hmm. And then there's this amazing moment where they with the most tongue-in-cheek possible try and reference why the Klingons,
don't look
like
so
Klingons.
Much different. Because in the original series, they basically just look like humans
with eyebrows come out.
With eyebrows, effectively.
They have a little bit more face, and they're funny costumes, but they're just like tanned humans, aren't they? Really,
yes, basically, yeah.
And he says, all the other people, they see the Klingons coming in, and then all of the other characters kind of turn around and look at him and kind of lean in, and they're very confused, and they're just like, so you're going to talk about the Klingons? Why don't you look like that anymore? And he says something to the effect of, we don't talk about it with outsiders.
They are Klingons, but we don't talk about it to outsiders. Yeah, because O'Brien's was it a genetic experiment? Some sort of bacterial infection or something? Some sort of virus.
It is. I think it's one of my favourite moments in all Star Trek because it's so self-referential. They obviously know that. Mm-hmm. They don't look. They changed the design. It's a TV show. Everyone knows that, but they just have this beautiful retcon, which I think is just exquisite. It's one of my favorite parts of this episode. I love it.
Yeah, and they're all kind of now searching for this Klingon that they've lost that they think's human. They're all kind of looking for him, and there's some really great clips. So that you've got O'Brien and Bashir trying to use one of the lifts, and he just walks into the lift and he goes, level 21, please. And he does nothing. Level 21, nothing. What's going on? I don't know what to do. It's because on the in the original series, you had to basically there's a lever that you had to pull up and then say level 21, and you kind of basically took you up or
what
down whichever way.
I've always found that weird about the original series. So because they can say computer, what is the blah 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 in other places, doors open by themselves. There are other elements where they can talk to the computer. But it seems in this you need to hold the hand thing and then turn it slightly to activate.
Yeah.
It's really weird. I mean, obviously this is total pedant cast, but it's really odd that they play it really well for a joke.
Because Bashir kind of looks at him and sort of we couldn't figure this out. It's he turns to him and he goes, "I won't tell anyone if you won't."
It's the thing that I've been watching DS9. And I'm on season 2. Season 1's a bit of a slog, just like most early seasons of Star Trek is.
Late season 3, season 4 is where it really finds its gear. It really does. I'm on season 7.
It's 90 episodes, Joe.
It's halfway. It's literally halfway through.
But I mean, from season 1, 25 episodes a season, odd. 25. It ends up being quite a lot of episodes when you count it up.
It does.
But what I've missed is from my memory of. Oh, that's so funny. Bashir and O'Brien. I don't really get into that until a little bit later on, but it's just...
They hate each other to begin with.
It's just roaring fun. This is just absolute roaring fun. They're going for it.
Yeah. They really, really are. And obviously you've got kind of the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, all in the background all of this time. And, the thing that they have with that, Sirio Jones is a trader who's come from a planet and has basically bought these little creatures called Tribbles. Which are basically like a ball of cotton wool, a fluffy ball of cotton wool.
Cheap as hell prop making. That's what that is, Joe.
that kind of could wiggle a little bit, so it looks like it's alive. And he basically tries to sell them as pets, which one of the crew of the Enterprise, Uhura, really, really takes to them, so she buys one. But then it turns out that they breed like crazy. You feed them, and you end up with millions of things. So Kirk's trying to protect this wheat, this grain, and this Sirio Jones has bought all of these. He basically only bought a couple of these tribbles, and they're basically just multiplying all over the place. They're all over the Enterprise. They're all over the space station. And then the Klingons arrive. And they're giving him shit because they want to come down and spend some time down on the ship. And you've got the person who put out the emergency broadcast who was like desperate for Kirk to protect the grain, who complained at Kirk for not protecting it and taking the job seriously enough. And Kirk's got like the Klingons, this guy telling him he's not doing his job properly, all of these tribbles around the place. And it's just basically an episode of Kirk losing his shit. And it's great.
It is just like, because the Tribbles episode itself is pretty silly. You know, the whole thing is like is pretty fun. And obviously we can talk about the bit later on with the things landing on his head and how they managed to integrate that so perfectly. Like, it's just
really well done. Yeah.
But it's silliness in its own right, isn't it? And then obviously they just add to it with this. But we have missed one element, which is Sisko at the beginning being interviewed by
the Temporal Police.
The Temporal Police, who I always love. I always love these guys. Like, they're always dead fun, and there's people going around correcting the idiocy of Starfleet officers. Like, I just think there's like, is there anyone more confident in Starship officer history than those who travel back in time and think, oh no, we won't change the history at all.
Yeah.
No problem at all. Like, what if they go back and they've got some kind of new space disease that only exists 400 years later? They touch a handrail, and maybe this is me living in COVID mania. They touch a handrail, somebody else catches that disease, to which they have absolutely no immunity to because they don't have a vaccine for it, and they all die. Like, you don't have the confidence. You don't have the confidence to be able to do this, Star Trek.
Alternatively, you could send them back in time in order to get the sound of a whale call, because there's this satellite that's going to destroy Earth if you don't. So,
just casual. I think everyone's a little bit too casual. I'm with the Temporal Police. In terms of,
they have a really great line as well because they're basically interviewing about what happened to make sure they haven't made any changes, and they basically sort of like ask him, so what happened next, and he's like, and then it appeared, and they're like, what? Oh, the Enterprise. And they say, which Enterprise? He's like, well, it's the first Enterprise, his ship. And they're like, it's Kirk, James T. Kirk. He has 17 temporal violations.
Yeah, he's the worst one. The agents called Dulmer and Luxley, which is a bit weird. I was looking through IMDb thinking, that's odd names.
Weird.
As of course, anagrams for Mulder and Scully, which is great. Which is stupid as fuck, but brilliant in its own right. Like, I appreciate that. That's really fun, isn't it? So where are we? Are we at the bar scene yet, or are we a little bit early for that?
We're a little bit earlier than that. So you've got them kind of searching around for, and I think we need to discuss the whole scene with Bashir trying to basically have sex with what he thinks is his own grandma.
The horniest man in Starfleet.
There's always one of them, to be fair. You've got Kirk in the original series. You've got Riker with his sex trombone in the TNG.
You mean Riker doing anything? Standing up is sexual for Riker.
Riser,
Go and look at that YouTube compilation, guys, because that's funny as hell. Yeah.
Every 2 weeks he's going away to Riser to get his fill.
This
and
man
then
has a lot of shore leave. Can we do anything about that? No, he's going to Riser. He's commander. He's fine.
He needs it. And then DS9, you have Bashir, who, again, he likes himself Riser. But in this episode, they get onto a lift, and it's it's the same one who gets onto the lift with them the first time when they're trying to figure out how it works. And she basically starts flirting with Bashir, and she tells him her name, and it turns out that it's the same surname as his great grandmother. And he's like, wait, you realize she was flirting with me. And O'Brien turns to him and goes, she's only using you to get to me. Which is great. And then he convinces himself that it was his great grandmother, and he had to have sex with her. He was his own great grandfather, and Bashir's just looking at him like, you're an idiot. O'Brien's looking at him like, you're an idiot. What are you talking about?
It is pretty amazing, isn't it? There's a little bit of trivia that it's Deirdre L. Immershine is Lieutenant Watley who plays this woman, and I think she was on Riser actually as a pleasure girl.
Probably. They do stuff like that a lot.
Yeah, they are totally reuse. And there's a quote here which is a little bit odd because there's not a lot. I mean, there's not a lot for her to do, but it says she brought on because none of the other actresses the producer had seen during the casting process could say the role, the one line from the role, Deck 15, convincingly enough. So they couldn't say Deck 15 convincingly enough, and which is a bit odd. But then obviously she comes up later on. I think she's in the scene in the twice. Is she? She's in it twice. I think
she is. Yeah, she's in two.
So they obviously liked her performance, saying Deck 15. I don't know. But it's an interesting little thing that Wikipedia thought was interesting
worth
enough
noting.
to note. Yeah. So this is fun, and let's just take a moment to really think about the levels of horniness which we cannot actually fathom. He thinks that this is he makes the leap from this woman's attractive. She's got the same name as my grandmother. What if I'm my own grandfather? Like that is a boop boop boop. That is quite a leap to make in one.
I want to have sex with this woman so much to make it sound as though I'm not breaking any violations in terms of the temporal police. I have to sleep with her, otherwise I'm not born.
Yeah. But you think
and then where would you be?
Exactly. Even just her seeing him, you think would be enough of a temporal violation to potentially put his whole existence in.
It's not the only horny thing in this, though, as well, because meanwhile, going on at the same time on the other side of the ship, Dax and Cisco are stood, and they see Kirk and Spock, and like, oh, fuck, it's him. And Dax stands there and goes, "Oh my God, he's so attractive! I had no idea, you know." And Cisco goes, "Oh yeah, Kirk had a bit of a reputation," and she goes, "No, not him, Spock." Which, by the way, if Shatner was there, he would fucking hate.
Yes, absolutely. It's also slightly later on as well. We get another really suggestive line from Dax, who was. So she's a symbiote, isn't she?
She's a Trill.
She was in a body of... You're a star. You're listening to this. You're a star. You know who Dax is. But before, she lived on Earth and she was in Starfleet or something. And there's a great line of saying, yes, about Dr. McCoy. Yes, he had surgeon's hands. And they're like, whoa.
Bones.
Well, Cisco's like, what the fuck? It's great. It's really funny.
Which, like, having watched the original series about Bones, is hilarious.
Not a conventionally attractive man, I would say.
No,
but who
does not like his Vulcans, filthy green bloods.
So, Joe, are we at the bar scene yet, or is there more?
We're pretty much there. So at this point, they realise that he is down in the bar because Odo's down there, and he realised that there's been somebody in the bar down in the space station who's asked for a Raktuccino, which is a Klingon coffee. And the waitress goes, "You're the second person who's asked for that today."
Stupid thing about Star Trek. People like cappuccinos. Cappuccino's a thing. Let's just have a little twist on cappuccino. Raktuccino, that's it. Move on. That's what they like. Yeah.
And they all drink it as well. Like Cisco drinks it like water. He has to have his Raktuccino.
So stupid.
Has to have Klingon coffee.
Yeah. But it is a funny way, and it's actually relatively good writing to say, like, okay, so we're going to use this thing to kind of to connect Devlin and all the other stuff that's happening, you know, like somebody else asked for this drink.
Yeah. So at this point, Bashir and O'Brien go down to the space station to basically join Odo and Worf. This is where you get the kind of the fun bit about like the Klingons being there and Worf being like, "Yeah, Klingons, we don't talk about it." And it's also another little kind of fun bit on this one as well. So this is where you've got the scene in the background from the original series, and Scotty, Chekhov, and another kind of throwaway. He's not a red shirt. He's actually, I think he's a yellow shirt. Kind of walk in. He's not really in any other episodes that I can remember, maybe a couple or something. And he vaguely looks kind of like Kirk, I guess, in some ways. And O'Brien goes like, "Oh, that's Kirk. That's him. That's him." And like O'Brien's like, "Are you sure?" And Bashir's like, "Are you sure? That doesn't look like him."
It's really like this is kind of why I wanted to talk about the bar scene so much, because I think it's the first really, really good example of them pushing the technical boundaries a little bit. Because number one, they've got the fight, which there's a lot going on, and they managed to integrate the characters really well. Some of it's shot just brand new footage, but they also managed to put the characters behind what's happening, but also like in place of characters who were actually in the show, actors who were in the show, and they changed their heads and stuff. Like there's a lot of really kind of interesting work going on here. But I think,
and basically,
sorry,
go for it.
Well,
I was going to say,
I just last point is the attention to detail to notice that Chekhov and Scotty are having a drink with someone who looks a bit like Kirk, and then to build a 2-minute scene from that. Like, I think it's just brilliant attention to detail.
It's fan service, because you're sat there going, "That's not Kirk. That's hilarious. This person in Star Trek doesn't know what Kirk looks like." Probably the most famous captain in Federation history, and they don't know what he looks like.
Yes, exactly. But it again, it is, as you say, it's great fan service because it makes you feel really good because you're like, that's not him. But they get to kind of eke that out a little bit.
And it basically turns into a brawl because the Klingons that don't look anything like the Worf Klingons start to fight. And it's quite a nice bit in the original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, actually, because there's a big bar fight that's started by Scotty because this Klingon calls the Enterprise trash. And afterwards, in the original series episode, Kirk is asking Scotty why he started the fight, and Scotty's there going like, "Oh well, he was stood there calling you this whatever worm and stuff, and said you were a slime ball and things." And you can see Kirk's face thinking, "Oh, he started a fight to defend my honor. I can't be that angry." And then he goes, "But we just passed that over because we can take an insult." But then he called the Enterprise rubbish. And Kirk's face just kind of goes. Kirk just kind of goes, "You started a fight because he called the Enterprise trash." Okay.
But I think this bar scene was like, this is the one that they used for the test footage, because I think as the 30th anniversary was coming up, and they knew that Voyager had George Takei on it, and they were like, "What are we going to do?" And there's lots of different ideas, and I think there was this idea of like, can we recreate? Can we use some kind of time travel element? And initially, it was thought to be too expensive, or just not possible.
The execs were totally not worthy. The execs were like, "No, this is going to be terrible."
And so what they did, they had Rick Berman, who obviously is the kind of showrunner of this. They used this scene, they used the bar scene, and they inserted, I think one of the camera operators or something like that. And then had him in the screen. And I think the visual effects supervisor was Gary Herzl, who created this test footage, showed it to the execs, who just thought it was normal. They just thought it was normal.
Didn't realize
from the show, and so you get this like, for them, this amazing moment where like, oh my god, like, can we actually do this? Can we actually take an amazing, one of the best episode of the original series, and put DS9 characters into it, and they obviously completely did that amazingly. But like, you can imagine
this looks better than shows we've done that were shot in the last 10 years. It's more convincing than some of the shows we've done that were filmed in the last 10 years with much more advanced kind of capabilities. So that's kind of one of the biggest testaments you pay. Because like I say, this was 1996, end of 1996. So what they've accomplished here is nothing short of incredible.
It really is. I think is it? I can't remember the guy's name. I'm just looking for it now. Stephen Beer, who was one of the producers of the show, he called it probably the most expensive hour of episodic TV ever produced. Because when you think about,
I can believe
it, there's the technical aspect of them, how they shot it, and all that stuff. But also, every single one of the actors who was already getting residuals needed to be paid. So, Shatner needed to be paid. All of these guys had to be paid for their performance, even though they weren't doing anything new. So, all this builds up into like just this wonderful medley of television, which, again, it's kind of hard to think that anything like that would be made again of this kind of scope, this scale,
Mm-hmm.
where are we then on the plot? Because we just had a bar scene, which
so after the bar scene, and again, this is another one of the really great shots. So in the original episode, after the bar scene, you kind of cut to the Enterprise, where there is this lineup, and Kirk's trying to figure out who threw the first punch and started the fight. And he talks to them, and there's like nobody will give away the fact it was Scotty. Scotty eventually gives himself up, but in the Trials Tribble-ations episode, basically they've managed to get
the DS9
O'Brien.
one.
The DS9 one. They get O'Brien and Bashir into this lineup, so you have Kirk walking up and down this line of this shot from the original series, and he actually turns to O'Brien and says, "Who started the fight?" And O'Brien is actually in the place of the person he mistook for being Kirk in the first place, down in the bar. And then there's like a fun little clip afterwards where O'Brien turns to Bashir and kind of goes, "Can you believe he spoke to me?"
But they are a bit worried as well, because like, holy shit, are we going to fuck up the space time continuum? Like, oh god, we've done it again.
Fuck.
Just complete.
Do we need to go back in time to stop us breaking the time continuum in the first place?
yeah, exactly. Which is classic Star Trek. Like, could we go back to the point where we fucked up and just do it again? And just keep doing that over and over and over again?
And then just to make it absolutely and completely ridiculous, it's at this point that they manage to capture the Klingon, and they find out that he has planted a bomb in a Tribble.
Well, let's bring it. Let's bring it back to the Tribbles then, because that is the core of the episode. Is that's what we're here to kind of enjoy.
Yeah,
and we do start seeing them multiply everywhere. Like they're stuck to the sides of walls. People are stroking them, and
they're coming out of the what you call it, where they get the food and drink from, the replicators.
They don't call them replicators. They call them food dispensaries or something. That they haven't got the replicator word yet, have they, in the original series? Mm-hmm. So they're kind of like gone. So the kind of and in the original series episode, the Tribbles at this point, it's like, why are there so many of them? It turns out the Tribbles are eating all the grain, and then it turns out that the grain has been poisoned by the Klingons to try and like basically discredit Kirk and the Federation, and claim the planet for the Klingon Empire. And this is where one of the big twists comes in, so we'll save that a bit for the end. But in this DS9 episode, what kind of happens is they're now in this frantic search, trying to search through all of these Tribbles to try and find this bomb. And there's literally millions of Tribbles, literally millions. And it's a really nice bit as well, kind of again. So in the original series, like Kirk's talking about how many there are, and Spock, I don't know if you have the exact number that he says, but Spock goes, based on how how much food they've consumed and how many there were to begin with and breeding rate, there are exactly 1,700,000 and something thousand, I think it is. 1,776,571. I wrote it down.
And in this DS9 episode, it's Dax that kind of goes 1,700,000
and then gets it confirmed later by Spock, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a genius." Yeah, it's very good. It's very funny. There's good. You know, this episode could go really, really badly. Like, it could go so poorly, and that it's also ham-fisted. But like in the worst way, you know, a lot of this is a little bit ham-fisted. It's a little bit over the top because they're turning it up to 11 and making it funny, adding the humor, things like that. Things where they're referencing the stuff that's happening in the episode end up just being like so joyous. Like when Spock says that back to him, and you can see Dax just completely just delighted with herself because she managed.
It requires you to buy into the stupidity and realize that this isn't like a traditional DS9 episode and Star Trek episode in some ways. It is like just them paying tribute to the original series. You just kind of have to go with it. Because, you know, the idea of a bomb in a Tribble is fucking stupid, if we're being completely honest.
But it was stupid in the 60s as well.
Yeah, exactly. The Tribbles, it's a ball of cotton wool, effectively, slightly hairy.
Yeah, it doesn't really. So we get this kind of like fun chase around the space station and the Enterprise looking for this Tribble. Now, what I noticed is, like, in modern Star Trek, they go, computer, locate locate all explosive devices on the ship. Bloop, bloop. Deck 12, section 4. Like, they do that in seconds, and that would be it. Because of like the rudimentary technology, I love how Dax says, "Oh, I just love this 23rd century design with the black and chrome." Like, they're having to scan each one.
And there's a lovely shot as well at the start, or very early on, when he's trying to like talk back to the Defiant that's cruising outside. It's hidden away outside, and it's cloaked, and he tries to talk to them, and he like presses the badge to like how they do it in DS9. And it's like, not working. What's going on? Because it's normally on the chest in DS9, whereas original series they had these stupid fucking like flip top things, and he realised, and he kind of goes and flips and has to talk that way. There's lovely little bits like that just kind of make you kind of go, you know what, this is really well thought out.
But it stays in universe though, doesn't it? It doesn't.
It does.
It's not all fourth wall jokes. The Worf one is probably the most obvious fourth wall joke, where they're like, we don't fucking know either. We're just not going to talk about it. Whereas it all feels like the characters, the DS9 characters, are all as like detached from it as we are. You know, from
they're having a great time. Yeah, they're having a great time.
It's great, isn't it? And again, total disregard for the space-time continuum. I am with these temporal police. These people need to be prosecuted for some serious crimes. Serious crimes.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say that the Prime Directive was broken in multiple occasions.
Nobody gives a shit.
But then, if there's any captain in Starfleet that kind of understands that, it's going to be Kirk, because he broke it pretty much weekly basis. Really didn't give a shit. So the end of this episode, basically, they managed to find the Tribble with the bomb, and it's in the storage compartment where the grain was being held. Now, in the original series episode, there's this great thing where he's trying to check on the grain, is Kirk, and he opens up these storage compartments up above him, and he opens up the door, and like a mountain of Tribbles just pile out. And he's there like trying to uncover himself with this pile of Tribbles. And Dax and Cisco are inside the storage compartment searching the Tribbles that are there. And again, there's this really nice clip where like something opens next to Dax, and you see a load of these Tribbles just drop from view. And you can hear kind of muffled kind of the sound of Kirk and Spock and the characters talking, kind of muffled as if they're just below them, sort of thing. And it's so well done, so believable. But they basically
Sorry, just on that point though, because I think as much as the composite shots are good, where you get DS9 characters in next to Kirk and they're talking to each other, for me, what I find most compelling is those shots as you described, where they reshoot it brand new, but they add the audio, or they add some element that makes it feel like there's continuity between the two. I think there's like they're the cheaper shots. You know, all they need to do is create a set made of plywood, and that's it. You're done, and then add the audio in later. But it just adds to the like. This episode feels so fluent. It feels like everything is just meshed together beautifully. And I think I really wonder how, without the kind of creativity that they bring, whether or not this episode would be remembered. Like some of the other movies, you know, some of the time travel movies, you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, what are we doing?
Just we mentioned about how expensive the episode was as well, actually. Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, actually taught the DS9 actors how the consoles and things were operated on the Enterprise. And he actually later commented that he was paid 8 times as much for this and the residual payment as he had been for the original episode in the original series.
That's amazing. But it does. But it is. It's that attention to detail, isn't it? It's getting him in for no fucking reason. He doesn't need to be there. To tell him how to press imaginary buttons that don't do anything. Like just to have that. Again, it's that love of the show, isn't it? It's that love that comes through, which I think is.
And the really great thing as well that's absolutely fantastic, and one of the things I really love about it as well, the character who's made them go back in time, this human, this Klingon that they thought was human, is actually the same actor that played the Klingon that poisoned the grain in the original series episode. It's the same actor playing the same character 30 years on. and it's just absolutely incredible. And it's, for anybody who's seen that original series episode, you're kind of suddenly drawn, and you go, because you hear his name at the start and you don't really twig, and then like you kind of realize, and you're like, fuck,
yeah,
it's
Charlie
him.
Brill. Charlie Brill.
Charlie
is his
Brill.
name. And because he's quite young. He's quite a young man in
He is, yeah.
in the original series one. And then he looks. I mean, I think for me, I'm like, should he still be alive? And then I realized actually this was shot like 30 odd years ago. So yeah, he's okay. He's fine. He's fine.
Yeah.
He's still alive. He's still going. Like it's not that far away in the 90s.
But I mean, such a nice touch getting him back for this episode. It's honestly.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much they managed to find the Tribble, they beam it out into space, and that's pretty much the end of the plot.
That's the plot, but there's the kind of a bit like the bar scene, I think it came from. I think somebody was watching the Tribbles episode, or was thinking about how do we develop this, and there's the bit, and it's just great. It's great in the original episode where Tribbles just keep landing on Kirk's head.
Kirk's head, yes.
It's a bit unclear how that's happening. Like, are they?
Yeah.
How are they just falling one by one? And they keep boinking off.
And it's obviously somebody just up above him who's like dropping them or something like that. Which Shatner. I would love that job. Fuck off, Shatner.
But what they do in this, and one of the original ideas was like, why don't we make it so that the DS9 crew are throwing them down on him? And that's what we get. They're searching through, scanning one by one each Tribble for the bomb, and then
as they throw them away to find out.
We just get that again, that great continuity between the two shows where it's the DS9 crew who are flinging them over their shoulder as they no, that's not it, move on, next one. They're just flinging them thoughtlessly, and then they're landing on Kirk's head. I think that is
and in the original series as well, like he's like constantly being hit by them, and at the end of this like spiel he gives, he's there for about probably 2-3 minutes or something, just saying like various things, and then he suddenly kind of goes, and somebody shut that door, because it's just like the Tribble's landing on his head.
And then they all go back, and this comedy duo from the Temporal Police just completely say, "Yeah, it's fine. We'll write a report, but don't worry about it. You'll be okay." I'd do the same. I'd want to talk to Kirk as well, which is a strange line from a Temporal Police officer. Not very professional, I have to say.
Although Cisco does talk to him. I think we mentioned it, kind of, didn't we?
He does. Yeah, that's the last bit, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think it's in the episode where they actually first see Kirk. Dax asks him and says, "Do you not want to speak to him?" And he's a little bit kind of, well, there's a job to do, this, that, and the other. But yeah, like right at the end, just before they go back and end it with the Temporal Police, there's this scene on the bridge, and it's not from the original series Trouble with Tribbles episode. It's a different episode, and there's basically Cisco walks up with a clipboard and needs Kirk to sign something off, and he just says, "Oh, I'm only here on a temporary basis, and I just want to say it's been an honour to serve with you." And Kirk goes, "Oh, thank you, Ensign. Here's the clipboard. Here's this back," sort of thing. So that's like Cisco getting to talk to Kirk,
which is really fun, isn't it? It's really fun, and they do it really well. One more little technical thing is I think the most impressive composite shot in this is Dax on the bridge. It looks to me, I tried to Google this, I couldn't confirm. It looks to me like they've just replaced Dax's head with whoever the actor was who didn't have any lines.
Quite possible.
Who was kind of leaning in the background of the shot with Kirk in the foreground, who's kind of leaning forward, talking to another crew member, and then they get Dax to look left and right, a little bit looking around. It works amazingly. Like, it looks so good, and it's never distracting that you think, oh, that's like really, really obviously badly done. It always works really well in the episode. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like it should be 1996, and this shouldn't look as good as it does. Which
it really shouldn't. Yeah,
which is really fun. So yes, this is like, I guess we're coming to some final thoughts. We could talk about this for another hour, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love this episode. If you couldn't tell already, I absolutely love it. It is everything that Star Trek is and isn't at the same time. Like, we don't get many episodes like this, but when we do, when they are like fun and they are engaging. I mean, I think some of the holodeck ones in TNG, like just so stupid, silly, but at the same time fun, and that's what I think has been missing from Star Trek since the end of Voyager. Probably is those fun episodes. Everything is so fucking serious. Discovery serious, Picard serious. Like just someone throw a pie. Everything.
Or a Tribble.
Or a Tribble. Someone throw a Tribble. It doesn't need to be as serious all the time. And I think this comes in the middle of quite a serious story arc, doesn't it? In terms of that season.
Yeah. It's when they're battling with the Dominion and the Klingons being dicks, and it is. Just another fun little bit of trivia. So Dax, who's played by Terry Farrell, obviously had a bit of a fangirl moment over Spock when she saw him, and actually in 2017, Terry Farrell in real life got engaged and married Leonard Nimoy's son, Adam Nimoy. So there you go.
Really?
Yeah, they're married.
Wow. There we go.
So
that is a completely irrelevant and also related fact at the same time, Joe. I like it.
It is. Yeah, it's completely irrelevant to the episode, but it's kind of like it's a fun.
It feels right. It
does. I think it's a good point to kind of end with, almost.
So I'm going to say this is my penultimate point, and then we're going to go to. I think we're hearing some communications from the ether, which we'll come to in a second. I've ordered the novelization of this of this episode, which I was just googling, and then I was like, novelization? Are you joking? So there is a novelization of this very episode, which I spent the grand sum of £2.81 from Amazon, and it's coming to me in the next week or so. So I'm sure.
Look forward to the episode of the podcast where Sam reviews the book of the episode of Trouble with Tribbles, which pays homage to the episode of the original series.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Honestly, I cannot wait for this to sit on my shelf proudly. And when we're allowed to, my friends come over and I can talk to them. I've got my sophisticated bottle of wine. I can say, oh, would you like to read my Star Trek book collection? And here is the best one. Here is the Pièce de Résistance, the book about the 1996.
The mortal enemies of the Klingon Empire, as Worf calls them, Tribbles.
Yes, Tribbles. Love it. So, Joe, any final thoughts? For this great episode?
I think no. It's just fantastic. Like we say, it's probably one of the best episodes of TV. If you're into Star Trek, you'll just it's there's nothing to dislike, basically.
Absolutely. I'm getting a communication. I'm putting my finger on my ear in a massive earpiece from the original series, and hopefully you can hear this. It seems like we're getting a communication from. Oh my God! It's Lieutenant Dave. Here he comes. He's coming in live.
Captain's log. Stardate 300321. As I drift in space without fuel awaiting rescue, I have time to reflect on the 1997 episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, in which the crew, because of science, go back in time to live out an episode of Star Trek the original series. And boy howdy, do they have an adventure. Things that occur to me as my oxygen depletes in this cabin. Bashir is so ready to fuck this woman who may or may not be his grandmother, like in a speed which would make Martin McFly's head spin. Fun Tribble stuff. Great Worf line about the Klingons. Really great way to retcon that in this episode. And really makes you appreciate some of the technical aspects of this episode as well. Just in terms of the way it's shot, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, you idiots have already probably said all of this. So, as I drift alone in the cosmos, remember me!
Wow, there we go. I mean, that was. It's quite amazing to hear Dave from a different temporal plane. I assume he's going to get a visit from the temporal police at any moment after that. Or we'll cut this because it wasn't that funny. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll chuck some sound effects in there.
Who knows? You'll find out. You'll find out if he's back next week or not. You can tell then as to whether.
Yes, maybe he's been transported to the Gamma Quadrant.
Maybe he'll get assimilated into the Borg Collective. You never know.
Absolutely. And Joe, you know what you've got coming up soon? You've got Voyager coming soon. Oh, you're gonna love it. In my humble opinion, the best Star Trek, but that's an argument for a different time.
I have about 8 episodes of DS9 left, I think.
Well, treasure it, and then you're on Janeway Town, and she does not give a shit about anything. She's brilliant. She's the right wing of Star Trek captains. Absolutely.
To be fair, Sisko kind of gets to that when you kind of get to like season 4. He basically loses his hair, grows a bit of a goatee, and he goes insane.
Well, Janeway has lots of hair, so I don't know if there's a hair correlated thing, but we can come to that.
It is for Sisko. He loses hair and goes insane.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well done. I've enjoyed this. Perhaps nobody else has, but that's fine because we're doing this for fun, and Random Trek is our this is our reward for all of the drudgery that we have to watch. Otherwise, I think this is when we get to really enjoy ourselves.
Hoops,
so this is
Outlander.
Lots and lots of shows, many shows that you can go back and listen to. All good episodes, though. Not denigrating the episodes at all.
No.
Right, Joe. This is good, and we will see you in a future time for another Random Trek, and otherwise we'll be back to our usual format. So we'll see you next time.
Yep. See you next time. Stop recording.
Wahey.
Me and you should come up with a show for next week to give to Dave, by the way.
Any show we like.
Just so that we can both say, yeah, we've agreed we're not going to do Family Guy.
We're not doing Family Guy. This was good though. I enjoyed that. I love talking about Star Trek. I feel like we're not quite nerds enough to have an entire Star Trek podcast.
Yeah.
Because like Simpsons, I know exactly the episode.
It's also not really popular enough either, sort of thing. Really.
Well, it is. I feel like it's a niche that's been served.
It is, yeah, and it's not really like popular now necessarily. You know what I mean? It's like today's kind of audience aren't necessarily as kind of knowledgeable about it as kind of previous.
Everything that needs to be said about Star Trek has probably been.
Especially original series.
Probably been said already.
Yeah, I'm so glad I did original series first, because if I hadn't and I tried to do like DS9 and then Voyager and then Enterprise and then went back to the original series, I think I would really, really struggle. I think, even just watching that episode, the Trouble with Tribbles is probably one of the best OS episodes, and it was difficult. To kind of go back to that and be like, Jesus, this again, is dated.
Joe, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, like this, Joe's a late comer to Star Trek. Not until 2020 lockdown did he. Which great time to do it. Stuck in the house, may as well have your escapism, through the lens of Star Trek, which I think is great. But yeah, it's like I'm always impressed by your ability to devour television when you need to.
I've basically got through all of the original series, all of TNG, all the OS films, all of the TNG films, and nearly 7 seasons of DS9 since July last year.
Which is nuts.
Which don't get me wrong, I realise that, we've had lockdown and not been able to do anything, but it's still pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, but I think it is good. Like Star Trek's fun because it's substantial. Like that's what I like about Star Trek, and I think maybe I struggle to watch to get through it because it's a 40-minute episode and very limited time outside watching stuff for the podcast. But like it's substantial. Every single episode is usually a good tale. It's well done. It's very consistent, and I think that's what the strength of something like Star Trek, especially DS9 is great TV. It's great TV. It's probably one of the best ones in terms of that overall arc of a story as well. Whereas some of the others a bit more episodic, perhaps.
Probably. Yeah.
Voyager.
No.
I mean, the last season of Voyager was like, yeah, we're still in the gamma, we're still in Delta Quadrant. Everything's oh no, we're home. That's it. You know, they literally just jump in the last couple of episodes, so you don't really get that nice build up, which I think is benefited elsewhere.
And I think certainly the original series is entirely episodic. There's none that follow on one after the other.
Uh-huh.
They go to a different planet every week. Kirk manages to have sex with a random woman every week. He manages to break the Prime Directive twice every week, apart from that one episode where it's a different captain who breaks the Prime Directive and Kirk loses his shit.
Have you done? Are you going to do Enterprise as well?
I probably will. Yeah.
I mean, that's like there's a 2000s show. Like they don't give a fuck. Prime what? I mean, I don't think that show is a Prime Directive. That I think they just in the second episode, maybe even the first episode. They just invade a planet and just start shooting people. It's literally first contact. It's first contact with an alien species, and they're like, we don't give a fuck about this. We're just gonna because it's it's 2001, and we're gonna just destroy anyone who doesn't look like us. It really is. It really is quite funny. It's quite funny.
So next week, let's do.
I was going to say Grace and Frankie because I'd like to do something that is not I'd like to do a non-male show. It's on Netflix.
I was going to say Charmed because I've not actually seen that. I think Dave has, but I don't know if it's on any streaming. But
well, let's say Grace and Frankie. And let's put Charmed in the docket for.
I think Dave has seen Charmed. It might not be on streaming, in which case Charmed's out. So
yeah, well, let's do Grace and Frankie then Charmed.
Cool. Have you seen Grace and Frankie?
I have. It's good. It's fun. Right, let's end the episode there. Thank you for watching. If you've been watching this, we appreciate you very much. We are a podcast who are doing YouTube on the side for similarly no money. If you enjoyed this, you can find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify, Imaginary Movie Podcast. I'll put a link in the description as well. And thanks for watching. We will see you next time. Pause while I press end broadcast.